Hey everyone, welcome to a fasting and beyond Q&A session. Things have been kind of hectic as kids return to school this week, so just getting them all ready for that has been hectic, but hopefully I will be able to start getting back into bi-monthly sessions so that I can talk to you guys and bring on different guests regarding different topics. So we're going to kick off the Q&A. I have about 30 minutes, so I'm going to get through as many questions as I can. And I hope that everyone's having a great day. The first question of the day comes from my friend Confessions of _ a server, who recently this week excitingly hit 10K followers. I'm so proud of him. If you haven't checked out his page, do so if you need a good laugh, because laughter is also a form of medicine. So his question is basically, how are you? And I'm doing wonderful. Thank you. I hope you're doing wonderful as well. All right, let's get to the next question. So the next question comes from Hey Keto Girl Hey, and it says, does extended fasting raise cholesterol? So this is an interesting question. It's not. So let's first talk about what happens during extended fasting. Oh, and I forgot to give my lovely disclaimer. So let me give it now. This is not medical advice. We're speaking for informational purposes only. So before instituting any lifestyle change, you need to speak with your care provider so that they can look at your specific situation. So the thing is, when you're intermittent fasting, and this is also a misconception that I see with keto as well, is that you'll see studies and they're like, oh my gosh, keto's bad because in a 4-week study, lipid levels increased. And the interesting thing about that is when you first start keto, and if you're doing an extended fast, you are mobilizing fat stores. So then, of course, everything goes up initially because you're mobilizing fat, and your body may not have adjusted yet to the period of actually using your own fat as fuel. So yes, you should not have like your fasting lipid panel done, which a lot of times will include like a LDL, triglycerides, etc., done during a prolonged fast, because you're mobilizing fat, you're using it all for fuel. So of course you're having circulating levels that are higher because you need that, because you're not taking in glucose. So you need something else to run your body off of. But those changes are transient. And so you can't really extrapolate those to now saying that, 10 years down the line, you're going to have a heart attack. So there are some transient changes that go on initially with a prolonged fast. But keep in mind, a prolonged fast is not something that you're doing, hopefully not doing weekly and monthly and all of those things. Everyone's different. I guess a definition of a prolonged fast is different. But remember, fasting for extended period of times too frequently is not necessarily good for the body. You can stress the body too much. So assuming you're practicing seasonal extended fasting or whatnot, I wouldn't worry about that at the time. That's normal lipid metabolism. And Better Fasting said, oh, wow, maybe that's why mine were so high. Yeah, if you had a lipid panel done during an extended fast, you can't even look at those results. They're not going to be reflective of what your norm is. So the best time to do a lipid panel is going to be when you are eating, hopefully, a normal, healthy lifestyle in your regular intermittent fasting period, and going from there. For me, I consider extended fasting anything over 48 to 72 hours, to me, is what an extended fast is. So that's again, this is ever evolving and changing, but that's my definition of an extended fast. All right, next question. So this question says, how long does it take to see a change in your body while intermittent fasting? And that response, I know it's going to sound generic, but it's individualized. Everyone is different. In terms of feeling better, I notice lots of people feel better and notice more energy, and just overall better sense of GI symptoms and things like that within the first week of fasting. Changes on the scale, sometimes people go 2, 3, 4 weeks and don't notice a huge change on the scale at all. But that's why it's important to measure a multitude of things. I really like the performance of body measurements, so like waist circumference, arm circumference, thigh circumference, because the common thing that I'll hear people say is that I've started intermittent fasting, I haven't really noticed a change on the scale, but my clothes fit better, my clothes are looser. Well, if your clothes are looser, you're losing abdominal fat, which is what we want to happen, because too much abdominal fat leads to health problems. So you're going to notice different changes. It's just that if you're looking for an absolute number change on the scale, that may lag behind, which is why it's important to note all the different areas in your life in which intermittent fasting can improve your health. Oops, I closed out of the Q&A session. All right, let me get back in it. There we go. Okay, so this question is combine a statement and a question from the Slimming Doctor, and it says, fasting is one of the best strategies by far. Agreed. Yay, glad you agree. Do you combine it with a caloric deficit? No. Nope. I do not count calories during intermittent fasting. I actually broke my MyFitnessPal calorie counting streak. I think I was up to like 400 days consecutively of logging, and it was hard to let that go, mainly because I was impressed with myself for that streak. But I don't know that it contributed to my weight loss success. Instead of combining with a caloric deficit, I prefer to combine intermittent fasting with eating whole, real foods. And this may be a little like hokey pokey or whatever, but I feel like your body knows what to do with real foods. Your body does not know what to do, though, with tons of processed carbohydrates, processed refined sugary foods, processed refined sugary drinks. Our body, we weren't meant to handle all that. So I find most people, rather than focusing on calories, if they focus on actually eating nutrient-dense foods and then combine that with the period of gut rest, are one, satiated so they don't feel deprived, and two, have really good health results. So that's typically why I don't combine it with an intentional caloric deficit. All right, next question. So this is from J Cartoon, and J Cartoon asks, so I do a smoothie to open my window, and then 4 hours later, dinner. Is that okay? I mean, I think it just depends on, are you seeing results or not? I guess I would ask, is there a particular reason that you open your window with the smoothie? And then you eat 4 hours later, so could you just have your smoothie when you're eating dinner the 4 hours later and extend your fasting time? And my bias is I'm not a huge smoothie fan, so because it just depends on how you make your smoothie, but I find a lot of people put so many additives in it that you'd probably be better off just eating the kale and whatever food you were going to eat with that. So again, I don't think it's a right or wrong. I think that it comes down to how do you feel and are you noticing results that are good for you. So for me personally, I don't drink smoothies at all. But I have friends that drink smoothies during their eating window and have great results. So I would say that if you feel like your results are good and you're seeing what you want to see, that's fine. Just be careful what's actually in your smoothie. But another option is if you wanted to extend your fasting window, have your smoothie when you're getting ready to eat dinner, if you like smoothies. Follow-up question is, I usually fast for 19 to 22 hours on any given day, but can't eat enough at 1 meal a day. And I think this is a two-part question. Oh, I see. I read that backwards. So really what you were asking is that you usually fast for 19 to 22 hours on any given day, but can't eat enough in 1 meal a day. So that's why you're doing the 4-hour window. Okay, that makes like complete sense to me. Yes, so there are a lot of people who report what you just said, is that they don't feel like they can eat enough, like that they've adequately eaten with just 1 meal a day. And so because of that, they do have like a 4-hour eating window, very tight, which is a variation on 1 meal a day. So yes, if I don't see any problem with the smoothie and then eating 4 hours later, because you're trying to get in more nutrients in that short period of time, since you're really only eating for 4 hours a day. Sorry, read that backwards. But again, make sure you're just not loading your smoothie with tons of sugar, just because I'm not a huge proponent of tons and tons and tons of added sugar. So that's my only caution follow-up to that statement. But yes, what you said makes complete sense. All right. Next question is 16/8 fasting effective? Yes, it can be very effective. I think when you're doing 16/8 though, there's a few things you have to pay attention to. One, you have to pay attention to what you're eating during your eating window, because you may not notice great results with 16/8 if your eating window is full of breads and pastas and juice and pop and packaged snacks and highly refined processed carbohydrates. Then you probably aren't going to notice too much of a difference. So the other thing is with 16/8, it's important to have discrete meals. So for instance, if your 16/8 means that you eat breakfast and lunch, then eat breakfast and lunch, but try to, the best of your ability, minimize how much snacking you do during the window. So just don't use the 16-hour or the 8-hour eating window don't use the 8-hour eating window to just graze constantly. So you still need to minimize snacking with whatever intermittent fasting regimen you do. But yeah, lots of people have good success with 16/8, especially if you're willing to change your nutrition at the same time. Now, there were, I don't know if I can get to it live. There were another set of questions that people submitted earlier in the week. And I thought I was going to be able to pull them up, but I can't. So I'm going to try to go off the top of my head from what I remember, and then I'll scroll back through some of these questions. But someone asked about medications, and they had like specific medications they were asking about, and then can you do those with intermittent fasting? So one, I can't answer questions about medications in specific because I'm not here to give medical advice. I do that in the office, so come see me. But over the internet, I can't discuss really, what meds you should or shouldn't take, other than in a generalized sense. So this is not particular to intermittent fasting, but you should never take NSAIDs, meaning medications like ibuprofen, naproxen, aspirin. You should never take those on an empty stomach because those can cause GI bleeds. So that's just in a general sense. Again, speaking in just general sense in regarding medications, what I don't consider medications breaking your fast unless you're taking the medication with, some drink that either has sweeteners or artificial sweeteners, real or not, stevia or not, whatever. I consider all of that breaking your fast. So if you're taking your medications with water, assuming that your provider has cleared you to take these medications on an empty stomach, I don't really worry about those breaking a fast, because the caloric content in that should be negligible, and hopefully you are getting such benefit from your intermittent fast and from changing your nutrition that eventually, hopefully, you'll be weaned off of those medications. But certainly there are certain groups of people who taking medications without eating can truly affect them, especially diabetics, or depending if you have high blood pressure, what your high blood pressure medications are. So again, that's why it's imperative that you inform your provider of your plan so that they can review your medication list and adjust them accordingly. You shouldn't play with your medications on your own. Then I think one of the other questions from before had to do with stevia. Again, I'm not a stevia fan. People say that it's natural. Studies are conflicting. So when you actually look at the data, yes, there are some studies that show that stevia may be, in fact, a better replacement than sugar. But then there's other studies that show hunger and insulin were increased with stevia. So the results on that are mixed. And I really try to tell people to simplify fasting, and instead of trying to figure out all the things that you can still have during your fast, how about you just focus on fasting, and you probably will simplify your life a lot more. So when in doubt, stick with water and electrolytes, being like salt, magnesium, etc. And if you like to have additives in your coffee, and people do, I'm not knocking it if you do, but you need to count that as not being part of your fasting window. And then maybe break your fast with your meal and cup of coffee with your heavy cream or whatever you put in it. That's not to say that people don't drink like MCT in their coffee and collagen and things like that for other reasons or other benefits. And so I'm not negating that you may not find benefit in doing that. All I'm saying is that if your purpose is to fast, that breaks your fast. So people do different things for different purposes, and there's now no one size fits all, but you shouldn't be consuming those things thinking that you're fasting, because you're not. Let's see. Now let me scroll through some of the ones that you guys have asked here, because we got about 10 more minutes. So Emery 71, I'm so bad at pronouncing Instagram names, I'm sorry, asked, how long do I need to fast to reach autophagy? So that's an interesting question. Autophagy, just to quickly summarize for those who may not be familiar with the concept, it's a concept of self-recycling where the body has a chance to recycle and rid itself of damaged proteins. There's some theories about the pathophysiology of disease in terms of many chronic diseases may, in addition from being related to excess insulin, are also related to the excess accumulation of damaged proteins without having sufficient mechanisms for the clearance. So diseases like Alzheimer's is an example of that. So when we talk about autophagy, there's baseline autophagy going on in our system all the time. Whether you chronically eat in excess and, again, a diet that's nutrient poor, there are low levels of autophagy present. The problem is you're probably not upregulating them often enough to prevent the accumulation of damaged proteins. So like your baseline level of autophagy may be able to keep up with just removing a little bit, but the years and years of excess has led to accumulation, which then affects aging and cognitive function and all of these different things. And so when you're really talking about autophagy, you're really talking about the need to upregulate it, which is why people are actually finding with a period of regular fasting of 16 hours, you're actually tapping into autophagy upregulation with that mechanism. The other thing that's important to note, there are several different ways to upregulate autophagy and, influence the mTOR complex and AMPK and all sorts of things. So it's not just like, it's not that intermittent fasting is the only way to upregulate autophagy. I would argue, though, it's probably one of the most efficient ways and most bang for your buck. So other ways to mimic and to like uprate autophagy is also when you restrict protein. So restricting protein to very low levels for a period of time will also upregulate autophagy, assuming that you're not undoing that with having, again, tons of sugar or whatnot. Also periodic caloric restriction. Sometimes people refer to it as fast mimicking, where you have like maybe 500, 700 calories or whatever. There seems to be some data to show that you can uprate autophagy like that as well. Exercise also upregulates autophagy. So that's why it's more of a lifestyle. When people just try to point out one thing about someone's diet and say, oh, look at that, that's how you do it, that's the only way. Fortunately, we have multiple ways to activate autophagy or to upregulate it. But honestly, rather than trying to calculate how many calories can you have, how much sugar can you have, how much protein do you have to limit, you could just fast. And you start to notice benefits potentially at 16 hours. Better Fasting said, how many days do you consider an EF? I think I answered that. I said, for me, an extended fast is anywhere 48, 72 hours plus is what I consider extended fasting. Under that, I consider it periodic fasting. Still scrolling, see if I missed anyone. Ann Gibson Smith asked, what are your thoughts on alternate day fasting? Again, assuming your healthcare provider has cleared you to do so, I think alternate day fasting is a very popular tool, especially in the treatment of disease. So there's actually, if you go to my blog, thefastingdoctor.com, there I list a couple studies in a blog post entitled Intermittent Fasting, Where's the Evidence?, that discusses the use of alternate day fasting in a clinical trial, actually, with normal weight individuals, and they saw improvement in various markers of inflammation, decreased visceral fat, etc., with alternate day fasting. They also repeated this study in subjects with obesity as well, saw similar findings. So I think it's a very powerful tool. But I'd like to point out that there are other ways to reap these health benefits with shorter fasting periods of time, particularly if you're willing to adjust your nutrition. Slimming Doctor, I answered this question earlier, so it's in the replay. But just the brief summary is, I don't recommend calorie counting with intermittent fasting if you're going to improve your nutrition to less processed foods. Basically, a general sensible diet, assuming you have a good concept on what that is, because I find there's lots of misconception on what proper nutrition actually is. Let's see. Okay, here's another one. Wine Country Keto. Ooh, where do you live at? Where's Wine Country and Keto? I want to come visit you. But this says, how do you approach colleagues who don't agree with keto, low carb fasting, etc.? And you mean, or he or she means colleagues as in healthcare professionals. That's an interesting question. Some people just don't agree with it. And I personally try to assess whether or not it's someone who's actually open for discussion or if they've already made up their mind that it's not appropriate. Because if your mind is already made, it's not worth the effort. I kind of just let my results and my patients' results speak for themselves. And it's kind of hard to continue to ignore if people are actually getting good results. I'll see people parallel weight loss to that of bariatric surgery with lifestyle changes such as low carb. There's articles you can point them to. There's more data on intermittent fasting, which is why I wrote that blog post, just for people who are curious about the evidence. But honestly, I love talking about it with people, but I really spend most of my time on my patients because if they're coming to me, I assume that they're open to being helped. And so I think that's just a better use of my time. And then the other thing is I like to do research as well. So once I accumulate enough personal data in my clinic, I do also hope to publish those studies as well to add to the body of literature. So I just think as more people start to utilize this in clinical practice and can speak and publish about their findings, I think that's going to also help further it in the medical community. So unfortunately, we have, like I said, we have a question specifically about a medication and with water, and I cannot answer questions outside of the clinic with regards to medications. And I'm scrolling. Oh, Slimming Doctor said they agree with the stevia sweetener comment. Yeah, I think we shouldn't be trying to figure out how we can still eat foods that are just as sweet if your goal is to reduce sugar. Then we should reduce sugar and then learn to enjoy the natural sweetness of food. Again, my personal opinion. Geetha Singh says, I fast 16/8 5 days a week. Do you think I should do it on the weekends also? Just depends. Are you happy with your results with the 5 days a week? If so, that's fine. I don't know that you have to have a specific regimen for 365 days of the year. A lot of people will do 16/8 during the week and then do a more circadian rhythm or sunset to sunrise fast during the weekends just to make sure you're not eating too late. But you can play around with that and just see how it goes. But I don't think I think fasting 5 out of 7 days a week is great. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Let's see. Mama Luce said, half hour of low intensity exercise versus HIIT. I'm on 38-hour alternate day fasting. I'm a fan of HIIT personally. I think there's research to show that high interval training, especially if combined with resistance training, is probably a very efficient way to exercise. So, assuming that you don't have any medical conditions that would preclude, or should caution you to doing HIIT, I'm personally a fan of HIIT, but again, physical activity, if you're just starting off, is going to be better than no physical activity. But I am partial to resistance training, especially in the fasted state. I do like resistance training. Oh, I'm so wine. Sorry, this has nothing to do with the post, but Wine Country Keto is in Sonoma Wine Country. Oh, great. Okay, so whenever I'm out there visiting, I'm gonna have to look you up. Oh, better fasting. You're so sweet. I wish you could be my doctor. Oh, that's so kind. Let's see. Geetha also said, other than black coffee, what do you recommend during fasting to stay focused on work? That's an interesting question. I think once you start fasting regularly, you're going to notice improved concentration. I mean, maybe not, but I definitely concentrate more in a good fasted state than I do out of a great fasted state. Other than black coffee, I do like tea. I don't add anything to my tea. I try to stay with herbal teas for the most part. But I mean, sometimes I will do like an orange tea or something like that, tea bags. But tea works really well for me if I'm tired of coffee. And then sometimes I will do, I'll put like a lemon in my water and just keep refilling the water in that. And those things help me. All right. And I'm scrolling. Okay, guys. Well, those are all the questions I have on there. Again, to the people who submitted questions earlier in the week, what I will probably do is go back through and share your questions as screenshots and then type an answer to those because I thought I was going to be able to pull them up. And I know I answered a couple of them, but I want to make sure to get to everyone who submitted questions. Just though, be prepared that if the question was about specific medication, my answer is probably going to say I can't answer questions about specific medications because you got to talk to your care provider. But yay, so thanks everyone. Hopefully this was helpful. The replay will be up for 24 hours and then we'll post it, as meaning at Michael Ganhart. We'll post this to my website, thefastingdoctor.com. He's my web manager and I appreciate him very much. All right, bye guys. Until next time, happy fasting.